Low ball in, Harry Wilson. Yeah! He's done it! Oh yes! Oh yes! Across the face of goal, headed in. Yeah! He's done it! What an introduction! Off you go!
Hello and welcome to the That's So Craven podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Fulham. We are back and it's the 24-25 season review. Here to talk through the season that was, record points total, an amazing start to the season, long games of long unbeaten runs, and just a brilliant season overall with some high highs, but some pretty disappointing lows in there as well. We're going to cover it all off today. Joining me today, we have Dave at Crave. How are we going, Dave?
Really good, thank you. Really good. Lovely little moment to reflect on the record points total season. And it's weird because it doesn't seem that long ago that the club gave us those tokens with our season tickets to go and get a free drink before the game. I can't believe how quickly it's all flown by. But yeah, it'd be good to look back at it and just reflect, I suppose, on some of those opportunities in the first half of the season where we were all kind of like, I can't believe we threw that one away. And then look at the back end of the season where, maybe it wasn't quite as fun. But it'd just be good to kind of just look back on it all. And it's also great to be on the show with you, Jack, again. I just miss those old days where we would be twice a week and just catching up, and just now seems we're on completely different shows. So, yeah, that's another fun part of today.
That's because I'm able to get some sleep now, so I'm enjoying it. But no, agree. Great to be on with you, Dave. And also joining me for the first time, but not for the first time on That So Craven, we have Michael. How are we going, Mike?
Yeah, good, thank you, mate. And I've got to dispute something that David said, because he said he didn't enjoy the end of the season, but seeing how much he was harassing Barry Hales at the Cottage last week, he enjoyed it. I don't think Barry did so much. So, but yeah, all good. Thank you, Jack.
And I have to try and fish out mid-show the recording that Dave sent me that he got Barry Hales to do, which is probably the most incomprehensible piece of audio I've ever heard in my life. And Dave just sent a message which came through to me at about 4 a.m. in the morning saying, "Clean this up, will you, Jack?" And that was it. So that's the level of respect has dived drastically since we first started doing this. But I feel like one of you now. So, well, guys, let's crack into the season. It was a busy off season, a lot going on, and the first thing I want to do is talk about the transfers that were made. So obviously there were some big names going out. We lost Paulinho at the end of the season, so that was a big question mark. A number of other players who've been around the club for a long time: Decordova-Reid, Marek Rodak. So a fair few transfers out, but let's look at the transfers in. And just to sort of recap for everyone who's not following along on our live streams on YouTube, and if you are following along on a live stream, please do jump in, ask your questions, and join in with the conversation. We do really appreciate that. Let's recap. We've got Smith Rowe coming in from Arsenal for 30 million, Anderson from Crystal Palace for 25 million, Sander Berger for 20 million from Burnley, Jorge Cuenca for 7 million. And then we picked up Sessegnon on a free. Willian came in on a free mid-season as well, and Reece Nelson on loan. I guess, Michael, I'll throw to you first. Looking at who left in the off-season, with Paulinho obviously being the biggest name, how would you have rated our transfers in before the season had started?
Sorry, Dave was just distracting me with his random arm movements there.
Sorry, Mike. I was responding to people in the comments there. So everyone was wanted me to get me moves out, so I didn't want to disappoint.
Oh, okay, good to know. Yeah. I thought this was That's So Craven, not OnlyFans, but okay. I think with any transfers, it's always a case of like the proof will be in the pudding. I think when we saw overall what we brought in, I think we were relatively pleased. Particularly, there was a lot of buzz around Smith Rowe and Anderson, for obvious reasons. Cuenca a bit of an unknown. I think Berger kind of seemed to be one that people weren't too keen on because there'd been so much talk about Andre, and that's the one that everyone seemed to have their heart set on. But actually, when you look at Berger's kind of physical profile, it seems to fit more what Marco Silva likes from his players in that position. So it seemed to make sense. And again, jury was a little bit out on Sessegnon as well, because lots of injuries. Was he going to be the player that we remember and the one that we wanted to see, or was he going to be sort of a shell of his former self? So I think there was a bit of skepticism around that one. And then, of course, Nelson was I think that was quite a late last day of the window, signing in true Fulham fashion. So, I'm not sure we had much time to get our heads around that one.
Yeah. And Dave, Mike touched on it there. There's a lot of chat about Andre coming in potentially during the season. There was also the potential of Scott McTominay, who's been incredible over in Serie A this season.
Yeah.
Now that we've landed on Berger and we've sort of seen, McTominay at the very top level this season, Andre actually probably a little bit disappointing for Wolves, and Berger maybe sitting in the middle. Are you happy with that signing in particular?
Yeah, overall, yeah. I mean, I remember last summer, we did a lot of our business late as we normally did, right? And we even started the season without jumping ahead too much. The Man United game, I think we only had Cuenca, Cess, and Smith Rowe in at that point, two of which were not fit to play, and the other was brought in as a backup player. So I remember at the time everyone was getting really panicky, and we hadn't at that point replaced João Plina. So when Berger came in, there was lots of rumours about McTominay. And everyone was kind of going, yeah, he could be a good player for us, but is Marco bringing him in to play holding midfield? What's going on here? It was really strange. And then all of a sudden, quick news, Berger turns up, and, we bring him in. And, I don't think he played much at the start. He was injured, wasn't he, when he first came? So he didn't really break in until after, I think, the October break, something like that, around that time. But between then and I think probably around the March international break, I thought he was excellent, and put in some real solid performances in there and really showed what an all-round midfielder he is. I guess we'll get on to, I didn't end the season so well, but yeah, I mean, generally, I think for 20 million, he looks a Premier League player.
And look, I think when you look at the transfers, the main transfers in, I think overall, it has to be seen as positive. Sessegnon on a free has been an outstanding piece of business. Berger, again, had a very solid season. I think Anderson has slipped back into Fulham life fairly well. Cuenca looks like a decent prospect, but there's one sort of sore thumb there, which maybe hasn't worked out quite how we would have hoped, which is Emile Smith-Rowe. And Michael, your thoughts on Smith-Rowe's season, and I guess now that the season's done and we've had a full season of Smith-Rowe, we know that Marco Silva's players and new signings often take a bit of time to settle in. Do you see the potential for Smith-Rowe to maybe turn it around next season, or are you a little worried about the signing based on his output this year?
I think there's more to come from him. You can see that there's a talent there, and it's maybe a confidence issue, not so much in his ability, but in his physicality, in his body. Because when he joined us, he'd come off the back of pretty much 2 seasons without playing a lot of football, had a lot of injuries, which we saw from time to time where he'd missed the odd game here and there for us. And maybe just it might be a sort of a mental block for him as much as a physical thing. But if you look at his numbers, they're not actually that bad. He scored a few goals, he set up a few goals. I think there's definitely more to come from him, but I don't think he's been as bad as a lot of the sort of the critical fan base has been thinking about him. But yeah, he does sometimes kind of leave you just wanting a bit more, because he has those bursts in moments where he does something really dynamic, and like the Everton game recently where he sort of set up Raul's goal, or he can do something like that, and then we don't see it again for pretty much the rest of the game. So you want more from him, but in moments he's been excellent. It's just those moments have been fleeting, and I'd like to think that with a full pre-season under his belt this coming summer, we'll see more of the Emile Smith-Rowe that we thought we'd signed in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's what everyone's hoping for as well. And Dave, I'll throw to you. Do you think maybe that, let's say we signed Smith-Rowe for 15 million, do you think we'd be viewing him differently at the end of the season? Or do you think maybe the price tag is is muddying the waters a little bit here?
Do I think that? I think people are just generally a little bit underwhelmed. I think they thought he'd have a bigger impact. And as Mike said, we've seen it in moments, but he's just, I think when he came in, Silva was saying he wasn't quite fit, and it took a while before he could play 90 minutes. But we were seeing flashes, and he was taking some risks, getting in behind. And then all of a sudden, he just went really quiet. And I think he had another knock around December time. I'm not sure it was really the price tag. I think maybe that's part of it. But I think the big thing is we're all excited, and we expected a bit more impact. So, God, my dog is driving me nuts for a second. You guys crack on while I just sort her out.
Talk amongst yourselves. Yeah, thanks for that.
No, all good. No, well, what I was going to say though is I agree with that. I think the price tag had a bit of an impact, but the fact that he came to the club with a knock, so physically he wasn't right, but I also think mentally he wasn't right either. Like, there's a massive confidence issue with Smith Rowe, which is clear, and I think he's talked about personally as well. And you see it when he's confident and things are going well for him. He is an exceptional player, and when he's not, as in when he's not feeling it, you can tell he really just goes missing on the pitch. And so I understand where the frustration comes from with Smith Rowe. I'm hopeful that we see a different Smith Rowe rock up to pre-season training, and maybe there's some other players that can complement him a little better, and we can start to build around someone who's obviously incredibly talented. And like you said, we've seen the flashes. There's a player there for sure. So, I'll pose a question to both of you. I'll go to you first, Mike. An overall score out of 10 for the transfer business this season?
A 6, maybe, maybe a 7. I think, none of them I don't think have been bad signings, but maybe we've just wanted a little bit more. Nelson, obviously the injury, I think it was just as we were starting to see the best of him, he kind of got struck down with that really bad injury that has basically taken him out for the rest of the season. Cuenca we've not really seen enough of to give like a proper judgment. Anderson's been a bit up and down. I like Anderson. I like what he brings to the side, but there have been moments where I can understand some of the fan base's frustrations with him. Sessegnon's kind of been the real bright spark of that because, the outlay for him and what he's kind of produced is, I think he's shown us all that he can perform at this level. Not necessarily as a left back, which was what we kind of brought him in as. He's clearly an attacking minded, midfield player. And, overall, I think it's been, it was a decent enough window for us. We didn't really make too many clangers with signings like we have done in past windows. So, yeah, overall, okay, but could be better.
Dave?
Yeah, I mean, there's an argument to say we overpaid on Anderson and Smith Rowe on reflection. And Smith Rowe's young. He's still got time, right? He's got time to turn it round. Anderson, he didn't really, after his injury around Christmas time, he didn't come back the same player. So that was a bit disappointing. And when you think we paid, was it 25 million for Anderson? And he's just turned 29, perhaps. I mean, and as well, we were all kind of, we saw the Palace stuff when he first signed, and they were saying, winding us up, saying, well, we've let him go. Good. We've got a better player in Lacroix, and we all fought back. And on reflection, they were probably right. Maybe they did, and maybe that was a good deal for Palace. But I still think he's an experienced Premier League player, and I think that next year, if we can keep him injury free and get him some protection in front of him, I still think he's more than capable at this level. But like Mike says, I think we're probably around 6.5 on, looking back out of 10 on, how I think that transfer window was. It was maybe just shorter. I think a number 8, which has kind of let us down a bit this year. And a goal scoring winger too, which I know are kind of priorities this window, which is reassuring.
I think you guys are probably bang on where I am as well. I'd say, like a 6.5, maybe a 7 at tops, just purely based on the fact that I think all of those players, barring Nelson, who was obviously got injured, actually contributed really well throughout the season, and especially you look at Sessegnon, like you said, picked up for a free and then ended up scoring a handful of goals and actually looking like a really solid midfielder or winger for us going forward. The one issue I think that would have pushed it up is we were just short one or two extra signings. He just really wanted us to spend that extra 20, 30 million just to bring in another body. Because I think that would have made a difference, especially as you saw when we started going down with some injuries. We lost Harry Wilson and Reece Nelson all at once, and all of a sudden we were a little bit stretched on the wings, and I think if we'd signed one extra player, that would have made a difference for us. So, I think overall a decent window, though. Like Mike said, no clangers, which is important because you can't really afford, with PSR in place now, you can't afford to actually, make expensive mistakes anymore. So overall, I think we have to be fairly pleased. So what we'll do now, guys, we'll crack into actually reviewing the season itself. And what we've done is we split this up month by month to try and give us a little bit of structure rather than jumping all over the place. Fulham started the season with what looked like a fairly good run of fixtures. We had Man United at Old Trafford to open up, and we've obviously pushed United a few times over the last couple of years, so that looked like an interesting game. And then two newly promoted sides in the league with Leicester at home and Ipswich away, as well as a Carabao Cup tie with Birmingham in there. 1-0 loss to United on the opening day, followed by a win at Leicester and a draw at Ipswich. Mike, looking back on these games, obviously the first game of the season was a disappointing loss against United in a game where we looked, I thought, fairly good and just got done by, I think it was Xerxes. I swear he only scored one goal all season. It was against us. And then a fairly good result against Leicester, although you'd expect it to be a bit more comfortable, and a disappointing draw with an Ipswich side who were, pretty terrible this season. How do you feel our start to the season went when you look back on the results now?
I mean, in hindsight, it's probably worse than what I thought at the time, in that I don't think we anticipated Man United being as bad as they've been this season. So coming away from that game, I remember thinking it's a disappointing loss, particularly when we had that moment when I think Pereira was running through and he could have slipped in a Wobie, I want to say, and Maguire just cut it out when it was like, it was the most clear cut of chances, and it just felt a bit typical of us. But actually, I remember coming away from the game thinking, we'll be all right this season. That's kind of the thing that, gives you encouragement. But then, 9 months later, Man United have been terrible, and we've somehow managed to lose to them twice. So it's like, okay. And Ipswich was the other one. That was their first real fixture where I think they had Liverpool and City as their first two games. So they were looking at it as in like, this is our first one where we can actually take points from. So to come away from it with a draw wasn't horrendous. But then you look at what Ipswich have actually produced this season as a whole, and you think, actually, we probably should have won that one as well. But, that's the way that the fixtures fall, unfortunately. So overall, it was an okay start for us, I thought.
And Dave, as you mentioned, a few of those signings hadn't come in at the very start of the season. I look back at the lineups, and we had Pereira playing in the 8, early doors, and Smith Rowe playing in the 10. And obviously we saw through the season that Smith Rowe in the 10 wasn't really working perfectly. Pereira, I thought, did quite well in the 8, but then we had a Wobie and Adama starting on the wings for most of those games as well. Do you think if we'd made some signings a little earlier, it might have made a bit of a difference for those first handful of games?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was one of my major frustrations, particularly of that Man United game. We were undercooked. We'd let players go and we hadn't replaced them. So we went into the game weaker than we'd ended the season before in terms of like kind of quality. When you think like Willian and João Polina and the likes. So I was disappointed with that. And look, I think we missed a trick really in that game. We had good. It was one of those games where we didn't have lots of clear cut chances, but we had, our build-up play was really good. We should have created more. And, Man United offered very little. I think Bruno, if I recall, had a couple of good chances. And we were just still trying to find our feet defensively. But you're right. I think if we'd have done our business earlier, which is the frustration every season, we might have actually got something out of that game. So I feel like we lost points by not doing our business early. Just to go back on what you were saying, I didn't think AP played particularly well at all in the 8 in the first part of the season. I thought he really struggled, and it was a big problem in our midfield. I thought Lukic, really surprised us all with his kind of how he adapted to the 6. But we definitely were unbalanced with AP and ESI. It wasn't working. But yeah, if you look at that month, you got to get a win in August, don't you? That just takes the pressure off. And we did that at Leicester. And ESR showed a bit of magic that day, if I remember. His goal was excellent, which really got us all kind of excited and thinking that he was going to have a good season. And I think Mike's right. Hindsight, Ipswich, now, we thought it was going to be tricky playing the newly promoted team. I think we had enough chances to win that one. And I was disappointed with the goal we let in. If you remember, like Delap, as good a player he is, he kind of just ran through the pitch without being challenged. I think it was just brushed off AP. And then the shot was a bit of a flimsy wrist from Leno.
Yep. And if we had Sander Berger, it might have been a different story, because all of a sudden you've got a bit of physicality in the midfield there to actually make that challenge that AP doesn't make.
There you go. And that's what I mean. We've done the business early. We might have got more points out of these games. So that's just that's the real frustration for me, thinking back. But look, we got 4 points, and that kind of is that's a decent return. It's probably par, I would say. But it could have been better.
Yeah, for sure.
Also, sorry, just not to gloss over the League Cup game. The significance of that was Stansfield started, scored, Birmingham came back in with a massive offer, and that kind of changed our options from the bench for the rest of the season, I felt. But the money was too good to turn down. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm still a bit jury's out on that one. I'll probably come back to me in 10 years' time and see what Stansfield's done with his career to tell you whether that was a good piece of business or not.
Probably at Birmingham, yo-yoing between the Championship and League One in 10 years' time. Let's push on to September. Have a quick look here. So we've got another cup game in here against Preston, the old penalty shootout, the record, I think it was a record set, 16-15 loss to Preston. A 1-1 draw with West Ham, a 3-1 win against Newcastle, and a 1-0 win against Forest. Now, looking back on this now, obviously, the first 2 fixtures are a little disappointing. West Ham had a very poor season. And, the cup loss, it was a heavily rotated team, so I think you can accept that. But Newcastle and Forest both finished very high up the table, and these were 2 very comfortable wins. Dave, I'll throw to you, seeing as you're swigging from your beer. Your thoughts on September as a month, and especially those fixtures, the wins against Newcastle and Forest?
I don't think the Fulham fan base are over that West Ham game yet. And, we're thinking all the way back to September, and I still think everyone's still kind of thinking about it and frustrated about how we drew that game. We were all over West Ham that day. Somehow they didn't give us a penalty when Adama was through on goal and then got bumbled over by Kilman, I think.
It was.
The box. Red card penalty.
Traore wasn't wearing red and white though, so that's probably why he did.
Unbelievable decision to not give us a penalty. But regardless, we should have scored more that day. And and we let in a goal in the 96th minute from a throw on that wasn't their throw. Even more frustrating. But I think one's we all remember that one, and we always talk about it. So that's the real game that sticks out. But you made a really good point. Newcastle in particular, I think that's an outside bet for maybe being our best performance of the season. I think, I remember being so comfortable in that first half. Like we played so well, and we let in a quick goal after the break, which we were doing a lot at this period. And then we just turned it back into, Fulham again, and we picked up where we'd left off the second half. It was just a great day out. I remember, really enjoyed that one. Was that the Preston one we lost on penalties? Is that what? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Wow. All I remember from that is Bender. Not getting near any of them.
Yeah, well, to be fair, the Preston keeper didn't get very close either for most of the day. Michael, your thoughts on September, and especially those results against Newcastle and Forest?
Yeah, I feel like that's where our season kicked into life because Newcastle, I think at the time I think they were unbeaten going into that game and they'd had a really good start. So that was a real sort of statement win for us with a good performance as well. The Forest game was a bit of a weird one in that it was basically a 0-0 game where we got a possibly contentious penalty, but
Mm.
you take those and yeah, we defended really well and resolutely, which is kind of we sort of did to Forest what Forest have done to a lot of teams this season. So it was a really impressive result for us, and I think our first clean sheet of the season as well. And we don't keep too
Oh,
many
yeah.
of those. So yeah, I think September was where we really sort of started to come into our own, sort of particularly towards the back end of that season, that month. Pardon.
And one thing to mention as well, I'm just having a look back as we're going through these, and Anthony Robinson was awarded man of the match in that Forest game, and this was early season when Robinson was really starting to do big things and getting very regular assists for us. It dropped off to the second half of the season, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But Dave, the importance of a player like Robinson chipping in with assists, I think the season before he'd only picked up maybe 4 or 5, and then this season he had 11 by like the halfway stage. How much of a difference does that make when you've got players like that who've just been, steady performers throughout their whole time at Fulham, and then all of a sudden they just click into this next level?
Yeah, I think the first half of this season was Robinson's best period in a Fulham shirt, I think. And I think Iwobi as well would fit into that the first half of this season. I thought they were both outstanding. And I think that was something that Marco had worked on all pre-season about how we were going to attack, at the start of this year was going to very much be Iwobi coming in to replace Willian, creating those triangles with whoever's playing on the left of midfield to try and free Robinson up and get in behind. So yeah, that left-hand side was absolutely flying. And the right-hand side, we had the really good option where we could switch it out to Adama. And Adama didn't have to worry too much defensively because he had Kenny behind him. So it just all was working, from a wide perspective. So, yeah, I know we'll come on to it, but, you got to think the left-hand side towards the second half of the season, a bit less effective because perhaps Robinson's got that knock, Iwobi's maybe a bit fatigued, and maybe teams have worked us out a little bit. But at the start of the season and this period, they were flying.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was just great football. And like you said, Iwobi, I probably should have mentioned Iwobi alongside Robinson because he was outstanding at the start of the season, picking up goals very regularly, easily his best period in a Fulham shirt as well. We move forward from September to a couple of shorter months. October, just 3 games because of international breaks. A 3-2 loss to City, a 3-1 loss to Villa, and a 1-1 draw with Everton, who proved to be a bit of a bogey team for us this season. Not a great October, Michael, but obviously, a couple of tough games there with Villa and City, proving this season to still be very strong sides.
Yeah, I think at the time, City was still the old City, the City that everyone expected to sort of steamroller the league. And I think we gave a lot of other sides a bit of a blueprint as to how to go about getting a result against them. Unfortunately, Traore couldn't finish all those opportunities that he had. But I think one of the most exciting things I remember seeing this season was when Traore and Kyle Walker were in a foot race and Traore gave him a good sort of 10, 20 metre head start and just absolutely burnt past him, only to kind of then just run straight into Ederson rather than doing anything sort of composed to finish. But it was a really exciting game, and I feel like that result, as much as it sort of, went against us, it actually gave us a bit of confidence. And then, of course, the international break comes, which is always our biggest enemy. And then we had a couple of really not so great results after that. I think the Everton one we conceded in the 93rd minute, and it was just a bit of a frustrating time because that international break really just killed our momentum. So yeah, a bit of a kind of a stumbling block of a month, I think, for us.
And a mention in that City game as well, Dave. assist of the season from Raul Jimenez with the back heel for Pereira's goal.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That was unbelievable, wasn't it? Real moment of magic. Mike's right, man. We should have won that game. To have lost it was really disappointing. It was the first game Berger and Lukic played together, if I remember right.
I think so, yeah.
And they pushed AP forward into the 10, and I think it was the first time we'd kind of given an ESR a rest. So few changes that day, but yeah, I mean, Adama had a really bad day out, and it's a shame because he'd started the season really well up until this point. It was almost like a new signing, yeah, everyone was just kind of, and I feel like it defined him a little bit in this period. Everyone kind of went, "Oh, that's Adama, though, no end product," and it was a bit of a shame because he had actually been given us a bit of end product up until this point, and it maybe set him back a bit. But what you look at those 3 results in that month. I mean, that I forgot they all happened at the same period. The Villa game, we should have been about 3 goals up. I mean, we were 1-0 up. We missed the penalty, and I'm sure Raul missed an open goal. He hit the bar, I think, from about a yard out. How he missed that, I'll never know. And just kind of all. There was something else controversial about him. Was there like a penalty?
Anderson got sent off. Yeah, so Anderson got sent off when Watkins was running through, which I thought was a little soft. I think at the time, Dave, you thought it was a red, but I was a bit unsure. But yeah, it just seemed to be one of those games where everything that could go wrong did go wrong.
Yeah, it was a Diop own goal as well.
Of course.
I remember being up at Goodison as well. I went, me and Mike were at that one, and we created so many chances. A bit like the West Ham game, where I think we were really comfortable for the most part. I remember Everton hit the bar in the first half, but other than that, they did nothing all game. We were the ones that were on the front foot. We were creating chances. Our build-up play was fabulous. I think Nelson came on and played really well, and we scored a great goal. And then we just did what we did at West Ham and just threw it away in the last minutes, just with by just not defending properly and staying switched on. And it was really disappointing. I remember being really gutted about that one.
But a disappointing October led to probably one of the best results of the season, at least in terms of feel-good factor. A 2-1 victory over Brentford at the Cottage, 2 Harry Wilson goals. I mean, that defines the month. We can just ignore the last result of November. But, I mean, just let's take a moment just to reflect on that, Michael. That moment, obviously, it's always great to get a win against Brentford, great to get a win in the last minute, but the manner in which that happened and, the videos that we see off the back of all of that, the noise in the Cottage, the place is absolutely shaking. And it's 2 superb goals from Harry Wilson as well. The first was nominated for goal of the season with the sort of little backheel flick over the top of the goalkeeper. And then the second, a really well-placed header. He really contorts his body to get the ball in the back of the net. And just an amazing comeback. And it's one of those ones as well where you saw the videos afterwards where they're all in the change room together. And Marco Silva says, Harry's had to wait for this opportunity and he's worked hard all season. And you could tell he was wanting to get onto the pitch and wanting to play, but just being held back by Marco. And this was his moment. How important do you think that was for Wilson? Because I think Wilson had probably one of his best seasons in a Fulham shirt and looked the Harry Wilson that I think we all sort of hoped for. Do you think that was a bit of a turning point for him?
Definitely, yeah. I thought that up to this point, he'd had a poor season by his standards in the, few sort of outings that he'd had. I remember him coming on against somebody earlier in the season and it just, everything he did, it just went wrong. And it just sort of felt like that he'd lost his place, he'd lost his confidence. He came on in this game in a different position, normally plays wide for us. He came on through the middle because we needed somebody making those runs into the box. A lot of our players always kind of down the wings, and I thought we played really well in this game. And I remember thinking on about 80 odd minutes, we've played really well and we're going to come away with a really annoying loss to them lot down the road. And it just needed an extra body to be running beyond the midfield to kind of make things happen. And Wilson came on in that central position. Lo and behold, he pops up in the right place at the right time, not once, but twice. and just absolute ecstasy. It was an amazing atmosphere. It was the kind of thing where it's one of those things that you couldn't believe, but not to be forgotten, in the middle of our equaliser and our winner, Fabio Carvalho nearly scored and Bernd Leno makes a brilliant save. And that would have been horrendous. That would have been worse than like losing 1-0 where imagine we'd equalised and thought, yes, and then Carvalho scores. And so a lot happened in that 8 minutes or whatever it was. And it still sort of gets me going now because it was an incredible sort of experience. I'm not sure I've quite had that kind of moment. Obviously, we've all experienced last minute equalisers or winners, but to have 2 in stoppage time was just unbelievable. And if I remember rightly, Dave torpedoed me after one of the goals from about 6 rows back or 7 rows back, wasn't it? So thanks for that. I've still got a big bruise on the back of my head, I think. But but no, absolutely brilliant, and just what a way to win that kind of game.
Sorry, go on, Jack.
No, I was just going to say to you, Dave, I mean, obviously there's been some amazing Fulham victories over the years. You talk about like the Juventus win and other big moments, the playoff final, things like that. Where does this one rank in terms of, greatest Fulham atmospheres and victories and just games in general?
Oh, that's a good question. It's very unique. It's a very unique kind of win. Very, it's definitely the best kind of home moment of the season. Getting that second goal was pandemonium in the away end. And as Michael said, I made a jump down about 6 flights of steps. I don't know what came into me. I was covered in bruises the next day. I remember being out of breath afterwards. It was just ridiculous. And it was just so like, it felt not just had we beaten them, but it felt so like virtuous, I think is the right word, because they just put everyone behind the ball, and they were terrible going forward that day. Brentford, they offered nothing. So to get, and for Frank to do that, and for us to kind of get the points, it was just like, that's what you get. That's what you get, Thomas Frank, for trying to go away from home to us and just grind out a point in that way. And so there was just so much to that one, and that is one of the moments of this season, and one of the moments probably since we've been promoted. I think probably in the top 3 moments since we've been promoted, just for how exciting that was, and just the atmosphere around that goal. It won't be forgotten. Obviously, it wasn't good enough to get into Sky's list of best comebacks of the season. They've got quite a high threshold, it seems, but. Other than that, it was great. And as you say, the month was better. We then followed that up with a win, which was really good. Albeit followed up with half the Palace team.
Yeah, it was a poor Palace team that day, and they had a man sent off as well halfway through the day. Harry Wilson did get another goal though that made it 3 off the bench for Wilson, I think. And it really, at that point, then he was knocking down the door. And unfortunately, later in the season, picked up an injury. I think it would have been a very different story if he'd managed to stay fit. He probably would have seen out the season and locked down one of those winger spots. But look, that's a good win, and we obviously had some bad losses against Palace through the season. The loss to Wolves, Michael, what the fuck happened?
You asked me that like it's my fault, but I mean, I
got to blame someone.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, it was one, I think, where I think Iwobi put us 1-0 up, and it was a really nice goal. And you think, oh, yeah, great. Okay, well, it looks like, we're on the way to sort of a comfortable victory. Gary O'Neill's probably going to get the sack from Wolves after this. Fine. And then all of a sudden, Wolves just pull a result out of nowhere. I mean, I think their equaliser, brilliant ball from Lamina. Cunha brings it down like he's prime Dennis Bergkamp and sticks it past Leno. And it's like, oh, okay. And I'm thinking, all right, it's okay. We always concede, but, that's fine. And then they score again, and then again, and then again. And it's like, oh, all of their goals were really good as well. And I think to compound it, we'd, not for the only time this season, but we've made all of our subs and then get an injury. And it just kind of went from bad to worse. And it's one of those ones that I think we just kind of parked it and we're like, right, that's happened. There's nothing we can do about it. Let's move on. But I just see the comment as well. We've got a fairly poor record when coming back from an international break. Let's blame the international break on that one. And thankfully, that was the last international break for quite some time. So, not a good one in hindsight.
Jack, did this one remind you of the Villa one in a way where, winning, cruising, hit with a goal? And we've seen a lot of times actually this season where we've been 1-up and then the other team have scored and we found it difficult to get back into the game, after that. We've lost a lot of points from winning positions. But it was also like, I remember we were really in the game at 2-1 still. And I think Wilson came on and hit the bar, I think quite a long range shot. And then we went down to 10 men and it was a Cunha masterclass that day. But do you think there's similarities, Jack, between this one and Villa, just about how it all happened?
I don't even think it's just similarities with Villa. I think it's just a very Fulham way of going about things. Come off the back of 2 wonderful victories where you think everything's looking up and then all of a sudden everything, like Mike said, everything just went wrong. And we were undone by some magic. Like Cunha's 2 goals were superb. Yeah. João Gomez took his goal very, very well on that day as well. From memory, it was pissing down with rain. It was a terrible day for football. And we capitulated. And you just see it happen too many times this season. And I put that down to those last-minute goals where we just switch off at really key moments. And I was scurrying around trying to find the stat someone put together, and I think we dropped something like 15 points to last-minute goals this season, which is just ridiculous because those points would put us into Champions League spots. So, when we look back on the season as a whole, it's those moments that count. And it's those moments that, previously were the difference between relegation and survival. Now we're fortunate that it's those moments that are the difference between mid-table mediocrity and qualifying for Europe. The problem is I just feel like we let ourselves down too many times this season. And we were a little unlucky with some injuries and just some general bad luck as well. But this game was just an absolute shocker, and a shit show. And from memory, I woke up overnight at like 4 a.m. to watch it as well. So it's one of those ones that was definitely not worth it. Let's move away from November. A couple of lean months with those international breaks of just 3 games in October, 3 games in November. Then you hit December. It's the busy period. It's all Premier League football, 7 fixtures in December. And look, when you look back on it, this is a very good month for Fulham. It's an unbeaten month, which is, superb, 7 games straight. I think this was the start of an 11-game run of fixtures where we went unbeaten. A 1-1 draw with Spurs, a 3-1 victory against Brighton, 1-1 against Arsenal, 2-2 against Liverpool at Anfield, disappointing 0-0 with Southampton, a 2-1 victory on Boxing Day against Chelsea, and a 2-2 draw with Bournemouth. It's a huge month, and it was a month at which I think at the end of December, you're often thinking, let's not be bottom at December because teams don't survive after that. At the end of December, from memory, we were sitting 7th in the table. We were only, I think, 3 or 4 points off the Champions League spots and unbeaten through the whole month. Dave, things were looking very, very positive at this point.
I remember headed into December looking at those first 4 games and thinking, oh God, what's par here? Is 3 points par?
I couldn't get 2 or 3 points. We'd be very happy.
Yeah. To go unbeaten in that month with that many fixtures, that is a really good return. Do you remember when we used to draw games? Because it feels like so long ago that we used to draw games.
I think the game against Bournemouth was potentially our last draw of the season.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? It was. I think you might be right. It's bizarre. But I remember just going into that. I mean, and actually we could have done better in some of these games. I think like the Spurs one, we should have won that game. We had so many chances. I remember Rao missing a couple of really good chances in that one. And I think Kearney actually he came on, scored and got sent off in that one, didn't he? It was bizarre. Brighton, I think we were excellent. Arsenal, maybe we were a bit fortunate to get a 1-1 there. Liverpool, we should have won. They were down to 10 men early, and we took the lead near the end, didn't we, with Muniz, and they still got back into it. I think the one that everyone remembers from this one, sadly, is the Southampton one, because everyone was just so disappointed around just before Christmas not to pick up 3 points in that fixture. But I think Mike wants to talk about the game after that. because he's been waiting a long time, and he'll tell you the story behind it. But he's been waiting a long time for that. But
Go, Mike.
just
Go.
before that, Bournemouth on the last one. By the way, we should have also won that one. How they didn't give that foul on Diop on the last goal, unbelievably poor decision by VAR. But anyway, Mike.
Yeah, Dave talked about all the negative stuff in December, so I'm going to talk about one of my favourite games, not just from this season, but ever. So I've waited a hell of a long time to win at Stamford Bridge. Before this one, I think I'd been something like 17 times and never seen us win. And
Jesus.
I don't like going to Stamford Bridge. Like the dog track, as it's affectionately known to Fulham fans, it's not a pleasant place to go to if you're a Fulham supporter. So you go there in hope more than expectation. You go 1-0 down quite early. I think Palmer scored. And for some reason took it upon himself to celebrate in front of the Fulham fans, which apparently opposition players don't get booked for nowadays. But anyway, we gloss over that and we get into the last 10 minutes when Harry Wilson off the bench again. Lovely goal. Brilliant equaliser. I think Iwobi had shrugged off Neto. Neto tried to pretend that he'd been elbowed in the face so that VAR would intervene. Sticks across to the back post. I think it was Castagna that heads it back and Wilson just kind of nods it in at the far post. Absolute ecstasy in the away end. I think there was about 10 minutes left. So you're thinking, yes, we've nicked an equaliser here. Brilliant day. I'll take that. Let's just not concede again. So then in the 95th minute to go down the other end on a counter-attack, I think I was sort of squealing like a little girl, as in just like all sorts of noises, as in get this into the bloody goal. And if I could pick anybody to score a 95th minute winner, Muniz is the perfect guy because he's such a cult hero at Fulham. And to get such a historic result for us with a goal from him late on, showing the most composure I think I've ever seen Muniz show in any situation, was just absolutely wild. There's a brilliant video from doing the rounds, or did the rounds at the time, on social media, of somebody who had filmed the away end from the Chelsea behind the goal end. And it's just absolute chaos. It's brilliant. There's like old men jumping over one another and like, it's just absolutely wild. And to boot as well, brilliant atmosphere that day. Tosin got it both barrels deservedly for a good period of the game. And I think that's what really spurred the team on to kind of dig in, get the result, and it was just absolutely brilliant. So yeah, I can tick that one off the bucket list. Win at Stamford Bridge, never have to go there again. Probably will go there again, but it's fine. I don't ever have to do it again. So yeah, really pleased with that one, and it capped off what was ultimately a really good month for us.
It's quite an interesting point you make about how I agree with you completely. I think the team actually sort of synced up with the fans quite a lot this season. You can see that the win against Brentford really meant a lot to them, like they were all Fulham fans. Like they really bought into what it means to be a Fulham player and a Fulham fan. They really wanted to beat Chelsea. They really wanted to beat Brentford. And those games, took on that extra little bit that I don't think we've seen quite as much over the last few years. And it's nothing against the way it's all been done and the way that Marco has pulled the players together, but just this year it seemed to click a little bit, and I think that it's made a big difference in those kind of results, and it just makes them a little bit more special because you can tell the players really want it, and you can tell how much it means to them because they feel like they're giving back to fans, and I like seeing that. I think it just adds to it all completely. December finished sitting pretty in the league. It wasn't our final draw. The first game of January was actually our final draw, which was another draw against Ipswich. And before I move on to the rest of the games, Mike, playing against Ipswich, who obviously they had a few positive moments through the season, but they are not a good side. Let's be perfectly honest. They got relegated fairly early, and we picked up 2 points off them across the course of the season. Not good enough. Agree? Disagree?
Yeah, I think you're right. And I don't think it's just the three relegated sides. I think if you look at our points return against all of the teams that finished below us, i.e. the rest of the bottom half, it's not really good enough, particularly at home, compared to the results we got against the sides in the top half of the table. It's quite remarkable how we've managed to do that the wrong way round, if that makes sense. When you're looking at the fixtures, we're all thinking, oh yeah, Ipswich, we should win that one, and we don't. And it just happened a few too many times this season. I think this was by this point, away teams that were sort of happy to sit in and soak up the pressure were kind of figuring us out. We were sort of becoming a little bit of a one-trick pony at times. It was always coming down the left, always looking for those sort of cutbacks or low crosses and not really getting bodies in the box attacking it. And it was just becoming a little bit frustrating watching from, the stands, where it just sort of seemed like a rinse and repeat of, the Southampton game or, other games the Wolves won, for example, where teams kind of sucker punch us a bit and we always feel like we concede to their only opportunities. It's not like they have loads of other chances. We just seem to concede whenever the opposition attack. And that was quite a worrying sort of theme throughout the season. But not as great a January, I think. And I don't know if I want to talk about that West Ham game because it's funny now, but it was so annoying at the time. The goals we conceded in that game were just all horrific.
Yeah, and look, I agree. It's not a good January when you look at it. Consider how good the December was. Obviously, a win in the Cup against Watford. It was a heavily rotated side who did very well in the end. And a win against Leicester, which is a game that you should be winning anyway. But after that, a loss against Man United, who at that point were a bad Man United. And then, dropping points against West Ham and Ipswich. It's just disappointing when you come off the back of those good runs. And Dave, your thoughts on January? Well, I was going to throw to Dave. He's just disappeared. But yeah, look, it's a disappointing January. Let's be honest. It's a month where when you look at the fixtures beforehand, you go Ipswich, that should be 3 points. And, they'd proven that they could do bits and pieces, but they weren't a good side. Leicester should be 3 points. West Ham should be minimum 1 point. And that Man United, having played well against them at the start of the season, how badly they were going, you'd think that should be another unbeaten month, picking up sort of minimum 8 points. And you walk away from it with 4 points. It just feels like, again, one of those moments where you do slip. And look, a great point here is the fact that we did start that FA Cup run. Dave's just come bursting in. I love it. But let's flick forward to February. And look, it's another month of, positives and negatives. We have the 2-1 win against Newcastle, a 2-1 win against Forest, so doing the double over both of those sides that season. A good win in the Cup against Wigan, but then a disappointing loss against Palace and an expected win against Wolves. Mike, it's a very Fulhamish month here with some ups and some downs, but starting to see a little bit more consistency, I guess, in the fact that we're getting the results we're hoping for.
Yeah, it's the life, I guess, of a mid-table football club in that, you'll get a good result followed up by a bad result. I think, obviously the standout ones here are winning away at Newcastle, which we hadn't done for quite some time, particularly in that we were 1-0 down at half-time and playing okay, but not particularly, exceptional, and then had a really good second half to kind of get the result. I think the Forest home game, 2-1 flatters Forest in that. I think Sells had a brilliant game and made loads of saves. We should have won that way more comfortably. It was probably our best performance of the season. And then the following week we got Palace, not for the last time this season, unfortunately. That's kind of what they do to us. And it's as you say, a mixed month. But on the whole, I'd say that's a positive returning results. 3 wins in the league and to get through in the cup is pretty much what you'd want from those set of fixtures. So overall, I was happy with that month. And also, I think that was Sessie's first goal back at Wolves. He played as a left wing back that day, and he scored in the first minute, if I remember rightly. So that was good for the sort of nostalgia. It was like, oh, good, we can sing the Ryan Sessegnon songs again. So that was a nice one to sort of get his renaissance going. So overall a pleasing month, I'd say.
Yeah, Dave, now that you're back with us, February, happy with February in general?
Well, yeah, you've got to be happy with 4 wins out of 5 games. There was some, I remember Muniz and scoring away at Newcastle. That was a real surprise. No one expected us to get anything from that game. So to win that was huge, especially because we were 1-0 down. And maybe we were a bit fortunate. I remember Isaac hitting the bar from a shot, which I thought it was definitely going in the far corner. But just an amazing win that really surprised a lot of people. As you say, going through in the cup was important, although it wasn't a great day. And then great performance against Forest. Good performance away at Wolves. And Palace, we just got, unfortunately, we fell into their game plan. We're not kind of clinical enough sometimes this season, as we all know. And Palace are a great team at just sitting back and hitting you on the counter, and they're just like our kryptonite.
Yeah, they really are. We've just fell into their hole a few too many times.
Yeah, thoroughly deserve to beat us.
Yeah, and I mean, let's look to March, and unfortunately, it's another time when we get to see Palace beat us. There was the joy of a win at Old Trafford, finally, after 2 poor results against Man United during the season, to go to penalties and win on penalties at Old Trafford. Bernd Leno on absolute fire that day as well. That save late in the game, I can't remember who it was who he made the save off. It could have been Ahmad or one of their youngsters who'd come off the bench. I think one of their sort of 17-year-olds who...
Obi, I want to say.
Yeah.
Yes, I think you're right. Just a brilliant day out again, when there were a number of them across the whole season, and then a very sort of classic Fulham month where a 2-1 loss to Brighton in a game that maybe we should have got more out of, and then a very good 2-0 win against Spurs with Sessegnon putting away just one of the goals of the season, I think, not just for the way he took the goal and actually scored it, but just the story behind it, going back to Spurs, the team who kind of ruined his career, really, and then just sort of putting the foot in and putting it away is just a brilliant moment. And then the less said about the Palace game, the better. Michael, let's look at the positives from March. The penalty win in the Spurs game, let me think. Well, tell me what you think, rather.
Yeah, the FA Cup game against Man United was kind of, for a lot of people, put into bed the ghosts of 2 years previous when we had that horrendous head loss at Old Trafford, and having been 1-0 up and looking like we were on our way to Wembley, just had that disaster where Willian, Mitrovic and Silva all got sent off, and it just kind of imploded from there. So to go and win away at Old Trafford, okay, it was on penalties, but great way to win. It's really exciting when you do it that way. So that made for a really good day out. Unfortunately, we didn't get to bask in it for too long, because a few weeks later we kind of just get sort of dumped out, and there's always going to be a case of what could have been with that cup run. But there was, that particular game at Old Trafford was the highlight of it. And obviously, beating Spurs at home after, I think we lost the week before to Brighton, and okay, it was a last-minute penalty, but we deserved to lose that game. We weren't very good. That was when we were sort of toying with that 5 at the back, wing-back system that I just didn't think we executed well enough to be able to do it consistently. So the Spurs one was a needed win in the league at the time, and again, nice to see Sessegnon come off the bench and stick one in the top corner against his old club. And of course, he did the thing where I won't celebrate because it was my former club, but everybody else around in the stadium was going nuts. So that was a good one. And then of course, the famed international break came back to scupper our enjoyment, and maybe not say so much about the Palace game, but I'll leave that to you, Jack, because that one hurts too much for me, I'm afraid. And
I will handball that one straight to Dave to talk about instead. Dave?
I'm frustrated about that one still. I'm a huge... the fact that I am a huge Marco Silva fan. I'm in the Marco Silva fan. All of those things kind of do...
Yeah, I think Dave's internet might have gone again. Fortunately, it was talking about the shit stuff, so I'm totally fine with it. Let's just say, though, that Marco got outdone on the day. And I think we saw it a couple of times through the season where Marco we often see Marco do it to other managers. Marco got out-Marcoed on the day, though. He got completely outthought by Glasner, who put together a formation and a system that just we were completely unable to deal with, and it got the better of us. And it's just unfortunate that it was, we see what Palace ended up doing, going on and winning the FA Cup. That it feels like that should have been us. And it's easy to say that now, obviously, but it really feels like we let it slip there. And it's hard to take and it's disappointing, but I'm hopeful that we're starting to prove and put together a squad that is capable of potentially challenging for cups more regularly, especially as now we see that we can beat the bigger teams. We've had really good results against Arsenal, Liverpool. Even though we didn't beat City this season, I think we played really well against them multiple times, played well against United this season. We're definitely at a much better stage than a few years ago where you're sort of hit and hope against those big teams and you just cross your fingers that you get them on a bad day and that we play out of our skin. It's not like that anymore, where we don't even have to be at our best to challenge these guys.
I think as well, the important thing there is that one, Silva takes the cup seriously, and that's something that we haven't been able to say with all managers. So we do try and actually want to win these competitions. And two, Silva never turns up to a game to play for a draw. He always sets his team out to win. He tweaks things, and sometimes it's a different formation or different tactics, but the intention is to win, and that's always a real positive because that kind of can carry you to success. Even as you say, if we're not playing brilliantly, we've got that mentality of wanting to win. We're not just going to settle for a point or going out to a big team heroically. It's like, no, we actually want to win these games.
And then looking on to April off the back of a disappointing result against Palace, we've got a 2-1 loss to Arsenal in a game where maybe we should have done better. A brilliant win against Liverpool, their first away loss of the season, a 3-2 victory. A 1-0 loss to Bournemouth, again, a disappointing result. A game against Chelsea where we should have done the double over them, let's be honest, but they kind of did the same thing that we did to them and scored 2 late goals. And then finally a win against Southampton, something we should have picked up much earlier in the season. But Dave, April, a month of ups and downs, but there's obviously the standout high there of the victory against Liverpool. How important do you think that is for the squad just to know that they can do it against the best team in the league? And I don't think Liverpool had won the league at that point, but it was inevitable. But to prove to ourselves that we're good enough to beat the best team.
Yeah, that game was a big surprise. Of course, you look at it and you by the way, I had to switch to 4G because I've just realised I'm probably just pissing everyone off with my internet issues this afternoon. I do apologise. But yeah, that game kind of came out of the blue. At a time we needed it really because we were starting to drift, weren't we? After that Palace game, we'd followed it up with a loss to Arsenal. By the way, again, we should have got something out of, remember Mooney's missing a horrendous chance to get us back into it. He did score, but it was kind of too late at that point. But the Liverpool game, we were all really surprised at just how well we played, and to score 3 goals against Liverpool in the first half and punish them for the kind of mistakes they were making at the time. It was a brilliant day out that day, and just showed that we can compete with the top teams in the league. And probably one of the best moments of the last couple of months, really, and there aren't too many. It was obviously this is the point where we know Robinson's injured at this point, so we've not got the same attacking threat down the left. But it all came together that day, and we were excellent. And if you look at the rest of the results, other than the Southampton game, which again we were quite lucky to get a win out of, considering we scored in the last minute. That game really stands out, the Liverpool one, and saved the month of April for us because we just needed those points to kind of stay in the mix.
And look, I think it was at this point in the season where we're coming up to the run-in. It's a push for Europe, but we're not. I think we were probably the least expected to push for that final 8th spot and get that final European spot based on the fact that the other teams around us had a better draw. But the game against Bournemouth, the game against Chelsea, they were games where we really had to pick up points, and we didn't. And I think that was the point at which we sort of say, okay, this season is all but done. Not completely written off, obviously, but the potential high that we could have reached just seemed to slip away a little bit. And we've seen it happen the last few seasons. We go into May, we've got 4 fixtures left. We kind of need to get 3 wins out of 4 there. And it just all falls in a bit of a heap. A 1-0 loss to Villa, just a disappointing performance as well as the disappointing result. A 3-1 loss to Everton, which is that's a shocking performance on the day. A game where we really should be walking away with 3 points. The positive, obviously, is the 3-2 victory against Brentford, and another great derby day, and to do it at Brentford makes it even better to do the double over them. I think for the first time in the league since the 40s, maybe. It was 90 years or something along those lines. So great to get that in the back pocket. And then a final day loss against a Man City side who were coming back into their own definitely at that point. Mike, how do you feel like we closed out the season here, considering the rest of the season and how well it had been? How do you think we finished off?
I mean, yeah, obviously it tailed off and it didn't quite finish the way that we'd all hoped for. I always felt with the run-in that we had, it was on paper, it was a hard run-in, and it did always kind of make us a bit of an outside bet for what ultimately turned out to not even be a European position anyway. So I'm a little bit more okay with that, because if we'd have put all this effort into finishing 8th and then it didn't matter because Chelsea won the Conference League and finished in the Champions League or whatever the permutations were, it would have felt like a bit of a wasted effort, to be honest. So I'm, yeah, there was plenty of things that, could have gone better. But, the last two wins that we had, Liverpool and Brentford, I think, they were satisfying in isolation. It was just a shame that we didn't really have the legs, I felt, to kick on and get those results when we needed them, because we just looked like we'd run out of steam, particularly when we were at home to Everton and 1-0 up, and just didn't feel like we had the impetus to really take these games over the line. And it's kind of been a story of our season where we didn't really put games to bed and have been punished for that. But, I'll take that month of May, write the rest of it off. We won 3-2 away at Brentford. It was a great day out, great way to finish the season. So, I think if you've got a season where you beat the eventual champions Liverpool at home, and that doesn't even get into my top 3 results of the season, I think that's an okay season.
100%. And I think it's tough. I'll throw to you first, Dave, before we sort of wrap up this season as a whole, because there's stuff I want to say around that. But
yeah,
a Brentford win, Dave, is obviously great, and it's a disappointing month and a bit of a disappointing way to just sort of slide away at the end of the season. But looking at that as a positive, it's great to get another good win against Brentford, and such an exciting game as well.
Oh, absolutely! To win at I won at the GTEC in the league, so to go to Legoland and punish them, especially in the first half, I really thought the worst. We could have easily been 3-1 down, couldn't we? They missed the penalty, or Leno saved it, whatever way you want to look at that. But to turn it round the way Marco did in the second half, I think you've got to give Marco credit for the changes that he made in that game, and for the players to step up, and for Kenny to lead the way to a derby win at their ground, and kind of, I suppose, derail them from their kind of outside chance of making Europe. That was really satisfying, and probably the kind of highlight of the tail end of the season. So, as you say, the other results in the month weren't good enough, really. City aside, I thought actually played all right against City. Just got done with a worldie by Gundogan
Rodri
in the first half, but the Villa game and Everton game below par, and it was just nice. If you're going to pick a win in that last 4 games, you're going to pick Brentford away, aren't you? So that's what Fulham did. And actually, I just think now's the time to start looking at the season as a whole, and not just kind of the last point period where we know there was fatigue and we know there was injuries. We did break our record points total. It's technically the best season we've ever had in the league, and I think it's just recencyism. You could be really down about how Fulham ended the season because it could have been so much more. But if you look at it overall, and as we've done now, and we look back at those Newcastle away and the Newcastle at home as well, actually, and then Chelsea, Brentford, all of these games, amazing moments. And I think this season won't be forgotten because of that. And I think, it will be in a lot of people's top three seasons in the Premier League, I think, because of those moments. So that's the kind of takeaway I want to have. It's kind of just, we've got to have some perspective on the season as a whole and not just the end where it kind of tailed off a bit. Yes, there's disappointment, but those moments won't be forgotten.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the way I want to look at it as well, is that, we've done the double over Brentford, we beat Liverpool, we've had really good results against top teams this year. The performances have been exciting. We've seen, great goals throughout the season. We've seen players like Harry Wilson really step up. Muniz had another good year. Pereira, when he was on, was great. We've seen Bassi turn into, I reckon, one of the best defenders in the league. Anthony Robinson, obviously, a superb season. Castagna stepping in for Tete for the majority of the season and probably expecting to maybe play a little bit of rotation, but mainly be back up to Kenny Tete, and ended up playing most of the games. It's just been great. Lukic, turned into this absolute beast of a player through the season that we just weren't expecting. And overall, there were some disappointing results there, and we did let a lot slip, but it does have to still be seen as a good season. And Mike, do you echo that? Do you think, obviously we always want more, but do you think it is a good season for us?
I think so, yeah. I think a bit of perspective. We are Fulham. We are the kind of team that, any season that we're playing Premier League football, playing good Premier League football, and we're not anywhere near a relegation battle, is on paper a good season. But actually, as you say, some of the moments that we've had this season, some of the the late wins or the comeback victories that we've had, some good individual performances and some progress with some of the the players that we have in the squad that we've seen are better now than they were 12 months ago. I think overall it points to a good season and an enjoyable season as a fan, because at the end of the day, that's what we want. We want excitement and enjoyment out of it. We had stuff to play for. It didn't quite work out the way that we'd all dreamed and hoped, but I think it kind of gives us encouragement going forward rather than anything to be sort of worried about or concerned.
I agree. There are always some concerns, but really going into this off-season, it doesn't feel like there's this big worry hanging over us. Obviously there's the potential for someone like Anthony Robinson to move on. There's always chat around Marco Silva's potential future, and we're seeing a lot of that at the moment. But you look at last season and how we ended, and you knew Palhinha was on the way out the door. The season before that, we knew Mitro was on his way out the door. It's always felt like there's this big moment that's just going to absolutely it has the potential to completely derail our next season. But going into this off season, it feels a lot more stable. The worst thing for us, I think, is, maybe does Tom Cairney leave, because we'd love him to stay. Even though really, if you look at it in footballing terms, that probably would be the right decision anyway. So for that to be one of our biggest issues at the moment is it kind of just shows that we're in a really good position. Some of those players who, someone like Josh King, who we haven't spoken about at all, is looking like he could potentially be a really key player for us next season. Sessegnon, brought in as a backup, I think should be challenging for one of those wingers roles next season, because he's proving he's a goal scorer and he can create as well. Harry Wilson had a season that proves that he's well worth another year in his deal, which he got. Adama showed glimpses of what he can offer. Iwobi had a good season. It's really overall has to be seen as quite positive. It could have been better, but that doesn't mean that it was a bad season. I think that's the sort of main takeaway here, is that it had the potential to be more, but it had the potential to be like an A+ or an A star. Really, I think it was like almost pushing an A. It was a good season for us, and you kind of have to forget about the number when you look at our final league position, because it was very tight around that sort of 8th down to 12th. Most seasons that points tally gets you 7th, 8th, 9th. Unfortunately, this season we still sit basically bottom half. But it is a really solid season, and it's what we hope for when you get promoted, is just to be able to slowly build and build and build. And we're doing that at the moment. We're constantly breaking records for wins in the league. the number of points that we get at the end of the season. You get assist records from Anthony Robinson. There were passing records or progressive records from Anderson as well, and there's a lot of positives to take. And Dave, I'll throw to you. What's your biggest positive takeaway from this season?
It's got to be the moments. It's got to be the moments. And actually, just going off what you were just saying, yes, the second end of the season tailed off a bit. And I think we all know why, as I said, fatigue, injuries, maybe we worked out a little bit. All these things come into play. But in a way, that's kind of the right time that you want it to tail off, because it inspires everyone at the club to want to go out and bring in some quality to improve us. If we'd ended the season really strong, we might not have be as aggressive in the market, if that makes sense, because, we're on the up rather than we've been great. We've taken a bit of a lull. Everyone now knows the issues. Let's go this summer and address them. So that's a positive way of looking at it, I think. And the links that we're kind of seeing at the moment are more for attacking players that can help us, I suppose, break the low block, which we've struggled with. And that's really exciting. So, it might be for the best that, that if there was going to be a tail off in the season, it was at the end, because it just kind of focuses minds on what we need. So I'm taking that away as real positive. And I just hope, there's things I hope for, like you said. I mean, I hope Josh King is part of the squad next season in a bigger way. I hope Kenny gets his contract, because I think he's really important at right back. And if we can bring in that extra quality, then, we can push on next season. So, but in summary, it's the moment. It's the Brentford, it's the Chelsea games that, in particular, to beat your local rivals. You don't do that every season, and you certainly don't do it away every season. So I think that's what I'll remember.
And Michael, same question to you. The biggest positives for the season?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely that. I think it's we've broken our points tally, and it's the fact that we look to be moving forward as a club. We're stabilising in the Premier League, which is something that we haven't really had since the Khan's ownership. Prior to Marco Silva coming in. So I think it's progress, even though it's not sort of at rocket pace. It's kind of sustainable, and it gives us something to build on going forward. So I think overall, those individual moments that some of those games have given us, along with a bigger, longer term picture of stabilising ourselves as an established Premier League club, is the positives to take out of the season that we've just had.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, let's very quick look at the table here, just to sort of close the review of the season out. Obviously, like I said, it's disappointing to finish in 11th. When you look at it and say we finished 11th, that doesn't seem like a very good effort. But, 2 points off 9th place. At one point, we were really pushing for that 8th spot in Europe. And look, I think we just have to look at it and go 15 wins across the season, a goal difference of 0, which, kind of shows the team that we were across the course of the year, a team that managed to do good things sometimes and bad things sometimes, and 14 losses, 9 draws, 15 wins. It's a good overall year for Fulham. Good goal scoring, good assists through the season. It's positive for me, and I'm looking forward to seeing how we progress in the off season, because I think this has the potential to be a summer where we really do build. I'm just hopeful that we get the investment required for that, and that we also we keep hold of Marco and we make the right moves in the summer to be able to actually build on what is a really solid foundation for going forward. Guys, I think we can probably wrap it up there. We've had a bunch of comments and questions come through in general throughout, which I think we've addressed as we've been talking. A big shout out again for anyone who hasn't joined already to jump onto the Fulham Discord. It's That's So Craven Discord. You can find it on all of our social profiles. You'll find the links there. Jump in. It's a great place to talk all things Fulham. We're very fortunate, in fact, to have Fulham Fan News as a big contributor who gives us the breaks before you'll see them on Twitter, and is very happy to interact with every other member in the Discord as well. So if you've ever got questions, you want to know about particular links, he's literally one message away, which is just a we're very fortunate to have that. Similarly, to have people like Cottage Tactical in there and some other great people within the Fulham community. So jump into the Discord and join the community and keep it growing. But guys, a massive thank you for joining on this one. It's been a big episode to talk about a lot of stuff. We've gone through the technical issues, and Dave, we've managed to just about keep you here for the whole thing. Thanks for joining us, Dave.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Apologies about that. My router decided to blow up midway through the show, which has been very, very helpful. But I've managed to get back on my 5G network. So that's to salvage something from this episode from my own perspective. Really enjoyed looking back at the season, reflecting on it, and bringing up some of those positive times again. That has been really good. And as I said, I just hope it does, highlight what we need, the way we ended the season, that we go out and do our business early. I don't think we will, but that's what I hope. And that we continue to be competitive in this league and push. And that's what everyone wants, I think. So, thanks for having me.
No, really appreciate it. And I'm going to dispute that you've got 5G there. It sounds more like 2G to me. Michael, massive thank you for joining today as well, mate. Really appreciate having you on. And it's great, as Dave said, he got you on because you've been to every game this season, and it's great to have the perspective of someone who's managed to actually be there for the ups and the downs. And hopefully we see more of you next season as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jack. And love going to the games, and you've got to take the rough with the smooth. So I'll always be looking towards getting those big away wins again, like we did have this season. So thanks, absolute pleasure.
No worries. And a massive thank you to everyone who's joined on the live stream. Really great numbers today of people joining in. We do always stream these episodes on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter/X. So make sure you're following us on all socials. Big thank you again to everyone. And as always, come on you Whites.